over. At least these guys are. Haley's like, oh, good. Okay, we got that on? Yep, okay. All right. That is on, isn't it? No, it's on. Actually, there's not as many juniors who are doing the at-home, so it's a lot of seniors. All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Have attention, please. All quiet, please. Thank you. Wow, we should probably get right to the pledge because we've got 3 people already standing, ready to go. No, it's okay. Let's just go ahead and do the pledge. Then everyone can sit down. Okay. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Okay, there we go. All right. Now you may be seated. Okay, yep. Some of you guys are noticing it's still symmetrical, and I move things over, Don't say that Biden is not going to complete his first term or only term or whatever term.
No, but like after Biden's first or second term. I'm
not going to be here to trouble my little head about that, okay? Right? Okay. All right, so anyway, be polite. Yeah, I'm looking up this. Shh, hey! It's all going to come around. Shh, it's all going to come around. Shh. Shh. Oh, it's not that long away. Yes, my echoing in my mind is my niece. She's much older now, but when she was little and she would get mad at her parents, here was what she would say to them. Have you heard this before? Yeah. Says, I'm going to put you in a really bad nursing home. That is actually pretty scary, so be careful what comes around. Don't mock the elderly. Okay? Yeah, it's like I saw a T-shirt one time that says, don't mock the elderly, because capital punishment or life in prison doesn't mean as much to them. Yeah, it's like, so, you know. So have your notes out. At ease, yeah. We already did the. No. What's your question?
Can we get into a political?
Not necessarily, but what's your question?
I want to.
About what?
Anything.
No, I mean, it's just random. No. We're trying to find as many areas. Trust me, as we go through this unit, you'll be like, let's not do what they did in Spain in the 1930s. Because that was, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, as many areas as we can find and so forth, that's fine. But yeah, just a reminder to you, if you look up there, the United States, we got a do-over. We got a do-over, right? We came up with a constitution, the first governing document for our country. Didn't work. What is it? You're just like, you're making me nervous. She's like ready to move. She's ready to pounce. I don't know. We should like put security on her or something. Or maybe put her in charge of security so that way she's got an excuse for being up and mobile and so forth. All right. So have your notes out because we are going to be continuing with the Irish War of Independence. And then we'll get into the Irish Civil War. And and that will, I think, wrap up things pretty well. For those who were the Blue Day group, I mean, we actually got a little bit further with them, and I knew that I was going to be able to see you guys. Evan, I'm talking. That we're going to be able to see you guys as opposed to yesterday when it was the PSAT and who knows whatever. And there's some videos, and hopefully we'll be able to show most of those to round it out. Okay. First semester's done. I think I've got a couple students here and there and so forth that I've communicated with. And just be aware. Usually teachers, and this semester is no exception, we're given like a week to get our grades wrapped up because there's like little loose ends and pieces and illnesses and so forth and so on. And I noticed it's because I was going through like all the different grades and it's like, ooh, looks like that person was just like 1 or 2 points short of like the next highest grade and so forth. So I've been giving alerts to those students to do what they can to wrap it up so that it's all taken care of by that time. Okay, because otherwise our focus is on this semester and actually on the year after that, because you guys got one more year here, right? Yes, one day at a time. One day at a time. Okay, one day at a time. And I want to tell you, you guys are in really good shape with respect to, let's just call it earning college credit through IB history. Because some of you guys recall whether you're going for the IB diploma on that track, or if you're in the venture capstone and taking like IB history this year, and obviously IB English, which is, that's what we do here. Mrs. Rao will be your teacher this year and next year for IB English, because you have to do 4 years of English as a high school graduation requirement for the state, period. So, yeah. But the good thing about that is, for those of you guys who are looking at attending college and so forth after high school, it puts you in a really good situation to not only be prepared, but actually get some college credit. So, for example, for the IB history, Boise State University, for example, gives 6 credits. And you're like, what is 6 credits? That's like 2 whole classes. Yeah, so on average, college students take like 5 classes a semester. So that's 1 less class out of 5 for the first 2 semesters of somebody's high school or college thing. So it actually is a valuable thing to consider when you're looking at. And you're in a good position moving forward on that. Why? Because we've taken the time to get going on the IA for the history, okay? And there was a lot of really good work done. And even where, and I've talked to some students individually here, I would say I probably pushed out about a quarter, because I'm like, whatever, a quarter of the papers, I wanted to like have students have something in a particular area that they might not have had initially, so that I can give them good feedback in our meeting, because I get 1 meeting. And those are going to be starting next week. In fact, some of you guys are going to be signing up today for a meeting slot either next week or the following week, okay? And the week after that actually is winter or February break, whatever you want to call it, Valentine's break, I don't know. And then we'll meet, and I'll give you some specifics and so forth on what to do for your final version, which I've actually got up right here now. That printed copy of your final IB is due May 14th. So that's a fair amount of time to get that perfected. So some students are going to be working on particular things, and I've given them like a little sticky tab with different sort of things that I wanted them to focus on. Other students, I'm like, okay, there's enough here. I mean, it's not perfect right now, but there's enough here so that we can have a meeting and schedule that. And yeah, you guys are in great, great shape. For those of you guys who are thinking, oh my gosh, I have to redo stuff and so forth, I had, out of last year's crew, I had like 10% that had to do that. They both did a great job and got the credit. I mean, out of, what was it, like 21, 22 students and so forth, all but one, who didn't ultimately take the direction that I suggested, but all but one got the passing score and can get the college credit, like, for example, if they attended Boise State University. Depends, because some colleges do, some colleges don't. But you guys are in a good shape. And, like, particularly for the research. I mean, students dove in there and did some great, great research on their papers, and so that's in great shape. So, I'm going to pass this around. Take a look here. I'm setting aside half-hour slots just to make sure that we're able to cover everything. I want you to bring, when we have our meeting, I want you to bring your IA paper with you, either printed or like an e-copy, so that you can take very careful notes on the things that I point out that I want you to put into your final version. Does that make sense? Because literally when I grade that final version, it's a little bit higher bar than I had for the first version. And I look at the notations that I had on your first draft, and I'm like, okay, did you fix this? Because if you did, then you should actually be able to bring it up to an even higher spot. And then, last year, that was the only thing that IB looked at. In typical years, it can give you, and my students have had a really good head start. And then, so almost like I don't know, depending on what sport you're playing, it's almost like a 10-point advantage in either volleyball or basketball for you, having a really good IA to begin with. What's that? Oh, okay. All right, well, that must, okay, so it's still a little bit raw, huh? Yeah, okay, yeah. So maybe we should just play 3 quarters. That would be good, yeah. So, in any event, if you were one of the ones, and I said, get it in to me by February 12th, if you get it in before that, I'll be happy to set up the meeting before the break. If you need a little bit of extra time, like the break, to work on that, you can do that. But then I'll get you guys set up for meetings like right afterwards. So I want to say by like mid to late February, I will have met with everybody. Everyone's on there in good shape to know what they need to do for their IA. So that'll be like done, taken care of. Yeah. Nope, I'm not going to hand those back. I can't. The next time you see that is when I sit down with you, the one-on-one meeting scheduled for a half an hour. And I've got them like 3 o'clock, 3:30, 4 o'clock, and 4:30 on like Tuesdays and Wednesdays. I would suggest, I mean, you don't have to, but you know, pick a green day. Although some students are like, no, I want to come in after school on the other day. But either way, you guys have the first shot at it. Okay, so I'm going to start. Anybody?
Yeah.
Okay, Mia. She's going to put hers down first. Okay, do you see?
We'll see how things go.
Okay, so you can see like I've got this is next week. There's green, there's green. Okay, okay? All right. Oftentimes spend a lot of time, but everyone pretty clear what's going on with that? Okay? And that's, I mean, it's like once I do that part, it's like that's there. We really don't talk about it much more other than it's like a reminder of the due date, and then a particular reminder, like if I don't get something back from somebody who asked for a redo by the 12th, I'll be like communicating with them probably directly by email just to kind of get a sense of the status of where things are. Because I want to make sure that you have enough time after we have our meeting for you to make the corrections. So after we have that meeting, then it's like, how much time do you have to make the corrections? Like 3 months. And like I told you, a lot of students are in a really good position because they did the bulk of the work when? Last semester. Yeah. Which is good. Yeah. All right. Questions. You guys ready to dive in? All right, let's do this. Ireland. Let's get back to Ireland. How's the situation in Ireland these days? Well, let me tell you. Where last we left off, people were starving in Ireland. Yes, do you have that? Why were they starving in Ireland, Mia? Oh, you weren't here. You have to find out from somebody. Do you have any idea why there were so many people starving to death in Ireland in the mid-1800s? For sure? Yeah, and this is on the video. I've got the video. So if you're gone, you need to watch the videos. Okay, Jeremiah's going to tell you. You need to make sure you write this down because we do cover a lot in here. When you're here and when you're not here, we still cover a lot. What is it? They had no taters, precious. No taters.
Oh, no.
Yes. They didn't have them for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or even second breakfast. There was no taters. They over-relied on potatoes as a source of nutrition and food for their population. And when a blight hit the potato crop in sequential years, I mean, it really wiped out the source of things. So here's the deal. Yes? 1840s in particular. You know what? I don't think French fries were invented back in those times. What? 1789, French fries were invented? Seriously? Really? Well, I'll tell you, Austin, Mr. know everything about potatoes and French fries and so forth. Yeah, okay, no, I know. So, what Idahoan made a contract with McDonald's to make massive Idaho potato supplies for McDonald's, and they advertise them as like Idaho potato French fries, and made that contract. And he'd earlier made a contract with the United States military for freeze-dried potatoes to supply our military forces to give them good food and so forth. You know how his name's? Simplot, yeah, J.R. Simplot, yeah. So he's a big, entrepreneur Yeah, but I mean, it's very interesting because he was a contemporary of my dad's father, who was head of the Idaho Potato Commission, who went around the country in the 1920s and 30s to like promote potatoes and give Idaho bakers a little bit of a special creed over those ones from Maine and other places. It's just not as special as a russet, right? I mean, if you're going to pay more for an Idaho potato, it's got to be something special, which is why you're like, oh, that's why we stuck it on the license plate, famous potatoes. I mean, how many other states have a vegetable listed prominently on their license plate? It is. It's not a fruit. It's a starchy vegetable. So anyway, they were starving, right? They were starving. Austin, was the British government providing all kinds of government assistance to help the poor, starving people in Ireland? No, I mean hardly anybody did anyway. So the British are like, well, that's not what we do, and the Irish are like, yeah, well, that's what you've been doing year after year after year. You're just trying to kill us. You hate us. You don't like us. You treat us miserably. We're starving to death. You're horrible colonizer imperialists. It's bad that you treat your African and Asian colonies that way, but we're just across the water, and we're not that different from the rest of you. So make sure you write this down. You ready? There was a lot of resentment in Ireland that came out of it. Okay? And particularly, if you have, pass it on. And this is, So if you have like a to-do, don't sign up yet. Sorry. I'm like, just sort of pass it along. But it'll be after the break. Unless you get it turned in earlier, in which case then we'll go ahead and fit it in before. But I think even the ones that have to do like a redo and so forth, plenty of time between that meeting that we schedule and when it's due. So, okay? All right, so.
Don't move. Please.
Okay. By that date, get in a redo that includes cover page, expand this word count, add a reflection to your works cited section. Okay? In case you lost it, here's the packet and a sample. And then after you get that into me, if you get it in before then, great. If you still need like the February break, that's fine too. And then we'll be able to schedule a meeting. I've got the sign-up sheet passed around here, so just ignore it for right now. Okay? We're talking about Ireland. Yeah, that's right. Because if you're in Ireland and you're starving to death and there's only so many places on the boat to go to America and you're late for the boat, are you going to be able to get on the boat and come to America and live a new life? Yeah, that's not going to work for you. It's not going to work. All right, so here's the deal. Not that people, particularly Irish Catholics, and when we say it's like the Protestant Catholic difference, it's not, think of it primarily as like Irish poor, okay, that happen to be predominantly Catholic. They're poor, they're not happy, they want to be out of there. They really are not interested in continuing on with the British government telling them what to do, because even though, make sure you write this down, even though Ireland, unlike the 13 colonies at the time of the American Revolution, even though Ireland is part of the British Parliament and they have representation there, they're outvoted. Okay? Just like we would have been 13 colonies if we'd had representation in the British Parliament at the time of the American Revolution. We would have been outvoted. But if we had the parliamentary representation, maybe we would have gone, oh, right, we voted against the taxes, they got enacted, I guess we'll just pay them. But here's the deal. Write it down. The key words, the two words are home rule. In the late 1800s, in Ireland, you get more and more people that are advocating for home rule for Ireland. And let me tell you exactly what that means. It means more autonomy. You're like, autonomy? What does that mean? I'll give you an example. How many of you guys, like right now, living with your parents, are advocating for more personal responsibility, later, I don't know, curfew times, I don't know, depends on which household you're in and so forth. More independence, but still within the household. You know what I'm talking about? Right? You want a little bit more say-so. And in fact, I don't know if you're anticipating, how many of you guys are anticipating saving money on college by living at home while attending college? That's an interesting one. You're going like, I could save a lot of money, but I'd actually kind of like that independence opportunity. How many of you guys would prefer to attend college away from home? There you go. I mean, actually, and a lot of the parents would be like, because it's an opportunity to gain self-responsibility and manage things and do your own laundry and, make sure that you have food prepared for you and yada, yada, yada. How many of you guys were like, I'm going to be on the meal plan for sure, because then I just walk into a room and there's food. Oh, so you're not going to live that far away? Oh, okay, so you got an apartment down near Boise State or live on the dorms. Yeah? There you go. They'll keep you fed. Yeah. So it's like, it's a transition thing. So put this down. In Ireland, they're advocating for home rule. So they want to remain, the people who are advocating for that are like, okay, we'll still be part of this Britishy thing. And trust me, part of the Britishy thing is where Canada is. Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. Right? I mean, you look over here, right by Danton, and you're like, good grief, we've got like 4 independent countries in the Pacific, and they all still have the Union Jack on their flag. What are they, still mama's boys? Sure, yeah, kind of. I mean, at least Canada put a leaf on their flag to indicate, yeah, we're independent, and Americans are always like, mama's boy. Anyway, so in Ireland, they were contemplating making that kind of change to home rule, more autonomy for Ireland. You got that? Was the British Parliament going along with it? Not quite. They were kind of debating it and this and that and so forth. They're like, oh, well, you're part of this, and why do you need to be autonomous? And da-da-da. I mean, the debate went on and on. Put this down. There were some in Ireland who were like, screw that. We should fight for and get independence. No, seriously, write that down. Just like the Americans did, right? The Americans don't have to go, we did a little bit of that. We're like, oh, please, Britain, give us, get your troops out of here and stop your taxes and yada, yada, yada. Everyone who is in a position to sign up for a meeting signed up for one right now? Okay, good. Okay, so there's some of them are going, no, we need to just get it. Well, they're like, well, the British aren't going to give it to. Well, then we'll just fight for it. Oh, my gosh, you're just going to want to fight these guys? Well, yeah. Well, no, just wait a while. We'll get home rule. 1912, write it down. 1912 was the very first year that a home rule bill passed the British Parliament in London. All right? So they got enough votes from English and Scottish and Welsh, as well as Irish members of Parliament, to adopt home rule for Ireland. It's not complete independence, but it's more autonomy. You guys understand that? But here's the deal. Make sure you write this down too. The way the rules were set up for the British Parliament, Ireland didn't get its home rule until that bill, the Home Rule Bill, was passed in 3 consecutive years. You got that? 3 consecutive years. So it passed in 1912. So the Irish are like, oh, patience is finally paying off. It's finally paying off. It passed in 1913. And then in 1914, it got put on the side, which really irritated many Irish. And a lot of the British are like, there's just something more important going on this year. Maybe you've heard that and so forth. You've been looking forward to something, and then your parents are like, well, I'm sorry. We can't do it this year. COVID. How many of you guys have heard COVID? We can't do that. COVID. Quarantine. Well, what was going on in 1914 that the British are like, well, I'm sorry, we have to pay more attention to this. Exactly, write it down. In 1914, World War I began. In the summer of 1914. So, the British are like, well, we'll get to it. We'll get the war over. Well, they thought the war was going to be over within a year. Was it over with 1914?
Yeah.
1915? 1916? 1917? 1918? Yeah, finally. When in 1918, Danton?
11/11.
Very good. Yeah, November. So the Irish are like told, wait for it, wait. We'll get back to the Home Rule Bill. Meanwhile, write this down. Meanwhile, things. It's interesting because during time of crisis, sometimes people come together. It's like unify, rally around the flag. Well, that didn't necessarily happen in all of the British provinces during World War I. Write this down. What area of the British Isles was like, yeah, we're not really interested in volunteering for that war?
Ireland.
Irish Catholics, write it down. Irish Catholics did not volunteer in large numbers for the British in World War I. Okay? Irish Protestants did. Yeah? It's the same thing. We talked about it in Canada. French Canadians, not as interested in fighting in the war. They didn't feel as connected with the country. They're like, the heck with this. This will actually shock you a bit. Guess which group of people in the United States, World War II, volunteered to fight for the United States even though they were having their rights denied in this country? Yeah, Japanese Americans. They're like, we'll prove those other Americans that we are loyal, true Americans. Yeah, that was impressive. But in World War I, when they put in conscription, like you have to be in the military, guess which population was not real excited about that? The Irish Catholic population, okay? Because they're like, oh my gosh. Now let's get the kicker, okay? So you have some of the British who are like, we're getting shot and killed, and it's not for any thanks to these Irish Catholics. So there's some resentment building up there. Oh, but it really will kick in. You ready? Here's the date. This is when it really kicks in. This is when the non-Irish Catholic population in the British Isles is like, oh, right. Yeah, that was good timing. The Easter Rising, write it down. The Easter Rising, it occurred in Dublin, all right, the largest city in Ireland. It occurred in Dublin on, I gotta make sure I get the right date here. Here we go. April 24th, 1916, the Easter Rising. It was a Sunday, Easter Sunday. The last time, the time that would be least expected to have an uprising. Who does the uprising? You ready? The IRA, the Irish Republican Army, self-proclaimed Irish patriots who were fighting for independence. They got some guns. They took over the post office building in Dublin. I think they tried to take over several other buildings and so forth. But they didn't have a lot of people involved. They didn't have a lot of weapons.
Why did they go to the post office?
I don't know. It's a big building, and yeah. So, I don't know. It wasn't even open for mail delivery. I don't know. Anyway, so, the British are very put out, but they crack down on it, and they kill or arrest all of the people involved. You got that? I want to say there are dozens, not even 100, maybe 50 at most or so, participating in this. You ready? And the British are feeling really resentful that there would be people fighting, these Irish Catholics, these IRA. Oh my gosh. And so British are very resentful of it, and so they're like, well, this is crime. This isn't some insurrection. This is crime. And they treated it as such. Put this down. The leaders of the IRA who participated in this military uprising in Dublin City, they were executed. They were executed. Treason. They were executed. There's a handful. This is 1916, right? So in the middle of the World War I, they were executed, right? And most of the British population and so forth was like, yeah, they deserved it. They deserved it. Well, here's the deal. The Easter Rising was unsuccessful and successful. We already got the unsuccessful part. Their primary objective was to overthrow the British rule in Ireland. That's going to happen. But here's how it was successful. Make sure you write this down. It galvanized Irish Catholic support. It galvanized Irish Catholic support because a lot of Irish Catholics felt that the British were too hard, that these leaders of this IRA group should have been put in prison for what they did, but they shouldn't have been lined up against a wall and executed. They were made martyrs. And this is how you know that it was successful. Do you remember what the name of the political wing of the IRA is? No, it's that weird pronunciation. It looks like Sinn. Sinn Féin, right? So Sinn Féin, write this down. Sinn Féin is going to benefit from this new support among Irish Catholics for not home rule anymore, pal. We had that promise delayed and delayed and delayed. Forget that. We're going for the whole ball of, the whole shebang. IRA and Sinn Féin want independence, and that's their goal. So is that going to be like part of their political platform? Yes. So when do they actually have an election where Sinn Féin candidates can run on a platform of vote for us and we'll fight for not home rule, but we're going to be going for Irish independence? Well, here's what you need to know about Britain. Like America, we stick to the calendar, right? I mean, we'll have a presidential election in the middle of the Civil War. What the heck? We're like 2 years every time. Britain, write this down, they're a little bit more flexible. They'll put off having elections during, war. So, let me see, when would be the first time that in Britain they could really have, not interfered with by the war, when they could have like a parliamentary election? Danton tells us that the fighting in World War I stopped when? 1918. So the next month, write it down, December 1918. In December 1918, parliamentary elections throughout the British Isles, and including in the Irish part. In December of 1918, Sinn Féin won a big victory in the Irish Catholic neighborhoods. You got that? That's the payoff for the failed Irish Dublin Easter Rising, whatever, because the Irish Catholics are voting for Sinn Féin, voting for members of Parliament to go to London. Wait, nope, write this down. They don't go to London. They're like, screw that. We don't want to be part of some British Parliament. They get together in Dublin. Yeah, they get together in Dublin themselves, the Sinn Féin Party people. Try saying that 5 times fast. The Sinn Féin Party people, yes. And they have a really good time. This January 21st, 1919, write it down. January 21st, 1919, the Sinn Féin gathered in Dublin, declare independence. They declare independence. Right? So it's like their July 4th. And notice the timing of this. And this is what the British sort of really resent. They resented the Easter Rising because it was while the British were distracted by the fighting and so forth in World War I. And now here we've got this independence declaration right after World War I. And the British are really put out. All right? But it is, for the IRA and Sinn Féin, they're thinking, this is the perfect time. This is when we can get it. And you know what? They were right. They will get their independence. Let's get into the details of how it plays out. When the IRA supporters and the Sinn Féin and so forth declare independence, Britain's like, no, we don't grant you an independence. I mean, this is the weird thing. How long after the United States declared independence? When was the year? When did we declare independence? Do you remember the musical video that we watched in class? Yeah, you know the date, July 4th. What was the year? 1776, yeah. When did the British finally go, okay, fine, whatever, yeah, you get to be independent? No, not the same year. 1781 was the Battle of Yorktown. That was the last big victory for the United States. And then the treaty was concluded by like 2 years later, 1783. Okay? So here's the deal. But actually, let me ask you this. In the American War of Independence, when did the fighting start? Before or after the Declaration of Independence? Before. Like a year before, Lexington conquered. So here's the deal. The fighting has not started in the War of Independence yet. The declaration was made, like I said, January 21st, 1919. And everyone's wondering, like, well, the British are going to ignore that, but is it going to be a big fight? Well, I told you this is a guerrilla war, and much of the fighting is going to be guerrilla style. Here's how the fighting started shortly after the declaration. It occurred in an outlying area, a country area, where write it down, two Royal Irish Constabulary, RIC, police officers were killed. They were ambushed. By who? By the IRA. Yeah, so they were killed. Yeah, so the British are like, oh, so that's how it's going to be. You're going to have a guerrilla war. So the British responded by a couple things. One, first, they outlawed Sinn Féin. Oh, that's really going to hit them hard. Ooh, how are you going to enforce that? Ooh, you've just outlawed a political party. Well, they're not even showing up in London. And then they're like, okay, so wow, you just outlawed them. The IRA continued ambushing police constable offices, and most of these are Irish Catholics that are serving in the RIC. And when the British started sending in the military, they were ambushed by various different guerrilla tactics as well. Now, the military that was sent in, it's kind of like the British are going, oh my gosh, do we really have to summon up an army? Because in Britain, they were downsizing their army. After World War I, they were downsizing. They're like, oh, we didn't want to send it over to fight in the Russian Civil War. We certainly don't want to send it over to fight in Ireland. Oh, we will? Oh, we're going to have to? So they're like, okay, fine. We're going to try and recruit more guys to be in the British Army to go fight in Ireland. Write this down. Were there many guys in Britain that wanted to join the military again? Yeah, I mean, it's like they're like thanking their stars that they had actually survived World War I. If you were a veteran of the British military, you come back to Britain, you're like, I want a job. I want a regular job. Most of those guys, if they got jobs, are like, I've got my job. Don't give me a gun. Even though I know how to fight, I don't want to go over to Ireland because here's the deal. At least on the Western Front, I could see where the enemy was. It was over there. In Ireland, you don't know where the enemy is. This is a guerrilla affair. They're not dressed up in uniform, right? It's a guerrilla fight. So the ones that re-upped for the British military were the guys that had a hard time getting jobs, regular jobs. What does that tell you? I mean, they're really only doing it for the paycheck. Write it down. The guys that are in the British military, that were sent over to Ireland, are really only doing it for a paycheck because they do know how to hold a gun and point it and shoot it. And here's the deal, and I don't know, it seems like they should have had enough uniforms and so forth, but when those guys were sent over, there wasn't enough proper uniforms for them. So that's where they get a little bit of like the black police uniform and then the tan army uniform, and it's just kind of a mixed match and so forth. So their opponents in the IRA will refer to them as the black and tans. So you got some regular British, you get some British that are sort of mixed match uniform, and then, write this down, you get auxiliaries, which are sort of like almost sort of a part-time-ish, even lower kind of professional class of guys with guns for Britain going over to try and put down this insurrection. This is not like necessarily the best thing. Are they going to have big stage fights? No. You're going to have attacks and reprisals. Write it down. Reprisals. The British military, the black and tans, are going to do reprisals. They're going to hit hard. In fact, one of the biggest reprisals, they're like, I don't know where these guys are. So they're like, oh, I think this community is very much like, really bad. We'll go into houses and here and so forth. Well, here's a whole bunch of them gathered together at a soccer match. They open fire on the crowd at a soccer match. Like, that's going to really win over the hearts and minds of the Irish Catholic population. Now, one of the key groups that ultimately started switching sides as the war continued on was the police. They're Irish Catholics, they're local, and they're being targeted, and their neighbors and families and friends are like, you shouldn't be fighting for the British, you should be fighting for us, etc., etc., etc. Ultimately, many of those quit or, I don't know, necessarily joined the IRA, but that component part broke down. Okay? As I mentioned, over 2,000 dead, small number, but it was pretty ferocious at the time it was taking place. Assassinations, reprisals. And eventually the British just lost heart. They didn't want to continue doing the fight. Write it down. Here we go. July 11th, 1921. On July 11th, 1921, a truce was declared. A ceasefire. The British government and the IRA agreed to stop fighting. The British government, July 11th, 1921. So the Irish War of Independence didn't last that long, just a couple of years. But here's a key thing about the truce. The British government said, we're going to create a Northern Ireland partition. 6 counties in the north, these so-called Ulster counties in the north, will be partitioned. Yeah, so now you're going to have a little bit of a debate within the IRA as, is that okay? What do we know about Northern Ireland? Yeah, most of them want to stay in Britain. Maybe not the Irish Catholics living up there, the minority in the population, but most of them want to stay a part of Britain. So when a treaty was finally reached, write this down, December 6th, 1921, the Anglo-Irish Treaty. Do you see that in the handout? The Anglo-Irish Treaty. What gets independence? The southern counties, okay, which is where most of the Irish Catholic population is, has independence, but the northern counties remain part of Britain, which is what many of the people up there wanted to do. You got that? So that's the solution, right? And everyone lived happily ever after. Correct? No. No. Because not everyone in the IRA was happy about that. The Protestants up in the north didn't want to be part of a Protestant minority in Ireland. They wanted to remain part of this British thing. But the leaders of the IRA and Sinn Féin, these two guys, write their names down, Michael Collins and Eamon de Valera, two of the successful leaders of the Irish War of Independence. But they disagreed on the treaty. Michael Collins is pro-treaty. He basically says, we got the best deal we could get. If we were to try and continue fighting to get Northern Ireland as part of it, there would have been a lot more bloodshed, and basically we would have been forcing lots of Protestants that didn't want to be part of our country to be part of our country. So Michael Collins is pro-treaty. Whoops. Eamon de Valera is anti-treaty. He basically says, look, we're one island. That was our goal. That should be what we should get. This is not satisfactory. So is it just a minor difference of opinion? No, they're going to engage in civil war from 1921 to 1923. The two sides are going to be fighting against each other. So many of the people who die in Ireland are going to die after Ireland gets independence. I mean, we had our civil war, but we waited at least, 7 years ago in order to have our big, massive civil war. They had it right away. Eamon de Valera, right here. So here's the irony. Which side won? Pro-treaty. But which of these two guys is killed by an assassin? Collins. Collins is killed by an assassin. Collins is pro. And Eamon de Valera is anti-treaty. So, what ultimately will result? Ireland will be this country and adopt this flag with the green and the white, and ironically also the orange, which is representative of the Protestants. Who wins the pro-treaty? But they'll still be fighting and so forth in the aftermath. I'll post the videos because I want you guys to see those because those are good recap videos and so forth as well. Woo! Yeah. Did you follow all that? Oh, I thought these were, you're passing notes. That's cute.
Yeah.
Who's having a baby?
I